You're listening to The Weather Junkies.
Oh boy. Large wedge tornado coming up into Tuscaloosa.
A winter storm warning is in effect for our area.
Snow, we can expect at least another 2 to 4 inches for tonight. Then that snow is
The National Weather Service in Huntsville has issued a tornado warning for northwestern Massachusetts.
14 to 22 inches of snow!
Good Thursday evening. Thank you for joining us here on the Weather Junkies. We are live on this Thursday, and we have a special guest joining us from Little League International. We'll introduce him in a little bit. For now, though, Dakota is live from Colorado. Dakota.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Tyler. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, I'm live in Fort Collins, Colorado right now. Nice day. It got a little chilly overnight. It got into the mid-30s around here, but the sun was out all day. Radiational heating gave us a nice bump. I think we made it into the mid-70s today. So really still unseasonably warm for this time of the year. Actually, it looks like we made it into the low 70s. Seasonably warm for this time of the year. And it looks like it's going to stay really, really nice up until the beginning of next week. You know, we'll hit the mid upper 60s, sunny skies. It'll feel like it's somewhere in the 70s out there. So no complaints for me. I saw back east, though, it looks like there's even more unseasonably warm weather. I saw in DC they broke a record today, hitting 84 at DCA. Tyler, what's the weather in Connecticut?
We hit 72 today, so it was definitely a warm day. That's coming to an end because a front has gone through, and I'm looking at the Bradley observation, and I've had a busy day with Storm Ranger, if you haven't seen on Twitter, but I'm looking at rain here, and I don't know if the sensor is broken, but Bradley reported no rain. So we got a lot. I will say we got a lot less rain than we were expecting here in Connecticut, which may not be surprising. I mean, we've had a lot of difficulty getting beneficial rain. And it looks like another site, Meriden, reported no rain, and Hartford, the capital city, also reported no rain. So we just a day or two ago, we were looking at the potential for 1/4 of an inch today. A lot of sites got nothing. So crazy. And some areas in the Northeast, the drought got better with the drought update today, but it's still a severe drought, and it's only going to get worse. I don't even think we have a drop of rain in the 10-day forecast. So the drought just continues to get worse here.
That is no good. And it sounds like they're dealing with a drought down in the southern part of the country too. I was listening to Weatherbrains, this week's Weatherbrains, and yeah, they were saying they haven't had a drop of rain in like something like 40 days or something, and I think it was somewhere in Alabama. But yeah, anyways, that's the weather in our backyards. We'll move on to some of the topics that are trending in the Weatherverse now. First up, Tyler, I guess I should let you take this one because this is in your neck of the woods.
Yes, it's a tweet from the Laurel, which is a media blog here in Connecticut, and they actually used my photo from earlier today. They tweeted, "Warning, Storm Ranger in use by NBC Connecticut," as seen in this pic from Tyler Jankowski. And very exciting. Today we actually got the NBC Storm Ranger. You may know that we share a truck here in the Northeast between the stations that are owned by NBC, and the truck arrived around 11 a.m., I think, and we got it working. The radar signal was going back to the station, and we really had very little ground clutter. It's been very difficult here in the Northeast to avoid trees and other objects, but we had the radar positioned right along the beach at Hammonasset State Park on the Connecticut shoreline, and very little clutter, not a whole lot of rain, as I mentioned earlier, but it was very exciting to see the radar working and see the sweep emanating from Madison, Connecticut. So we have the truck here for several days, and obviously it's a dry forecast, but it is a phenomenal piece of equipment.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about these guys. What is the value added from them?
Well, if you're in Texas, Dallas has their own Storm Ranger. It's very flat there, not a lot of trees. The radar moves. and it's also very low to the ground. So as you know, with tornadoes and any situation with rotation, you want to know what's going on at ground level. And the Storm Ranger allows you to see as close to the ground as possible with the radar beam that's going around. Obviously, you cannot have any obstructions, but it's a dual pole radar. It's a Doppler radar and it's dual pole. And I can imagine a situation in Texas where you have a supercell 20 miles away. It sees about 30 miles out. If it's 20 miles away or 15 miles away, you could see the rotation and potentially even a debris signature if it's a strong tornado. But it's all about the position, and the wheels allow the radar to be positioned anywhere you want it, as long as there's no trees nearby.
Wow, that's so. This will this be? I guess you guys will broadcast the radar and use it in that sense. I'm assuming it won't be used by like National Weather Service to issue warnings.
Yeah, the data is all private right now. We distribute it back to the stations, so all 10 of the NBC owned and operated stations can display the radar data, even if someone else is not using it. So while we're using it, for example, Los Angeles could display the data if they wanted to. They have their own, so they probably wouldn't. But it all goes into our graphic systems. And the cool thing for me as a graphics-oriented person is that the radar data displays in our graphics software. For many years, a decade ago, people would have to switch between software applications to display your own radar, and that is not the case. We can show the sweep, we can show the local beam right in the program we already use. You really just turn on the radar, and it gets sent back through a cellular network. And if the cellular network goes down, we can put up the satellite dish and use that. So it's very cool in that regard.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on here to our next tweet. It's from Rob Simon. You can follow him at rsimon. He's a data visualization guy. He works for Planet Labs, and he used to work for NASA. He helped create the blue marble image that we know and love. This tweet says, Fort Collins yesterday morning via Planet Labs. On my way to go speak at a symposium for young scientists. And he's actually coming to Colorado State to talk to us about some of the work he does. He's giving the keynote talk at our symposium for young scientists. So we're really excited to hear him talk about his work and kind of give us some advice about some of the things he's seen along the way and what we can do to improve our research, improve our career from a data visualization level. And yeah, he shows a really cool image here of Fort Collins. It's actually western Fort Collins, right up against the foothills. You can see there's a lake, that's Horsetooth Lake right there. There's a dam, and then our building is that the really tiny spot on there next to the solar panels. So yeah, just thought I'd plug him. Really excited to see him talk tomorrow.
Yes, you have to love those high-resolution satellite images. Our third tweet is from ULA. It's a Twitter account with a bio that says, America's first space launch provider, unleashing unlimited possibilities in space, affordability, and reliably. The tweet says, update, GOES-R launch is being rescheduled. New launch date will be released once it's established. #AtlasV. So the much anticipated GOES-R weather satellite is not going up on November 16th. Was that the new date?
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't know what's up, but there's another delay.
Yeah, I read something about it, and it sounds like it's not going to be a big delay. It sounds like it's going to be another five days to a week. But these things happen with these launches, and they want to make sure everything is ready to go, perfectly done, so that there's no mix-up when they go and launch it.
Yeah, you don't want it to explode. That's why it's called GOES-R. It doesn't get a number until it actually makes it up there into orbit. I don't think many people know this, but the satellite's not going to be operational for more than a year after it gets into space. So to me, this is not a big deal. I mean, it's not like you're going to get your crystal clear new satellite images on December 1st anyways. You're going to have to wait a year.
Right.
A couple days is not going to make a difference.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people kind of peeved because they have to change a lot of people that want to fly out there to see it, and they have to change their flights and hotel reservations and stuff. But that's just small stuff compared to what a successful GOES-R's launch is gonna mean to the weather community. So yeah, still anxiously awaiting the launch, and the subsequent products.
Tonight, our special guest is Rob Guthrie from Little League International. Very excited to have Rob on the show. I was saying before the show that so often we have meteorologists and we have climate people on the show. For once, we're actually bringing in someone that is not a meteorologist, but someone that works in an industry, in a field that heavily depends on what the weather is going to do. So, Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
We want to talk a little bit about how you got started in turf grass management and how you got to where you are right now, and then we'll talk about the excitement of working for Little League. So, yes,
Sure.
Full disclosure, you graduated from Penn State. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep, I attended the Penn State turfgrass program. I have a bachelor's degree in turfgrass science from Penn State, and I'm also actually just finishing up my last semester on Penn State's World Campus for the master's program in turfgrass management as well. So I went to school, looking at turfgrass management as a career. So out of school, I started off on the golf course side of things. I worked as an assistant superintendent for just over 6 years before making the switch over to sports turf, and luckily enough landed at Little League International, taking care of the stadiums here on the complex.
So you are from the State College area. How did you get interested in studying grass?
Well, that's a good question. My parents actually suggested it to me when I was coming out of high school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I always had a love for sports. I played baseball growing up, and they said, "Hey, why don't you take a look at this program? Penn State's world renowned for their turfgrass program." And started off just taking a couple classes and really liked it, and started working on the Penn State golf courses there, and it just kind of grew from there.
That's awesome. I'm not a golfer, but I have heard many great things about the blue and white courses at Penn State. So you worked at the Hershey Country Club, another country club in Pennsylvania. Now you're at Little League International since 2015. So
Correct,
more
yep.
than a year. And, I say Little League International. Some listeners may not be completely familiar, but if I say Little League World Series, everyone knows what that is. Obviously televised nationwide in August. I'm a big volunteer at the regional level, and ever since you joined Little League, I've always heard murmurs that, oh, he's a Penn Stater, running the field. So naturally I've been interested, and we're excited to have you on the show. And the two fields that are seen on TV, obviously the two fields that the World Series are played on, and they're impressive looking. So credit to you for that. But explain a little bit about what you do during the World Series, and this is a year-round job. So what do you do in the off season? How did things change? Break it down for us.
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliments on the fields. At Little League International, we have the two stadium fields, Lomity and Volunteer Stadiums, where the World Series games are televised. And then we also have 4 additional practice fields on complex. I'm the only full-time maintenance worker dedicated to the fields. So I start my year off in the spring. I'm a one-man crew. I do a whole variety of jobs, pretty much everything that entails maintenance to them. And in May, I have 2 sports turf interns that will join me, work through the season. I train them constantly through the year, get them up to speed before the series. In about 5 days before the World Series begins, we have 25 volunteer grounds crew members come in to work on the fields. So my job changes quite a bit through the year, culminating at the World Series. But it's a very great. It's a really great experience to be part of Little League baseball.
So what are some of the challenges that you have seen in your little more than a year at Little League International?
Well, obviously the weather. The weather plays a big part in what I do. It dictates pretty much kind of what I can do and can't do. So starting off my year, once the weather kind of comes up to temperature, the soil gets up to about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Stuff kind of starts growing and taking off, and I plan my pesticide applications, and everything really around the weather. So all my maintenance practices, disease development based on the weather, water needs, field conditions, pretty much everything kind of goes around the weather. So that's a challenge I have, just kind of managing all these fields through the year based on the weather and the staff that I have.
So a large portion of the region has been dealing with abnormally dry, or in the case of the Boston area, severe drought conditions. I just checked the latest drought monitor for Williamsport, and it's abnormally dry, but the fields have sprinklers. Can you explain how the sprinklers play into what you do? Because from what I've seen, it's not a complete solution, right? I don't think if it's hot for an extended period of time, and you can only water so much, right? I don't think the sprinklers are a total solution. How do they play into?
Sure, you're right. Well, both stadium fields are fully irrigated. I base my irrigation off of kind of feel and the weather conditions and what I'm seeing as far as visual symptoms of the grass. You can kind of see when it's starting to get a little hot. The fields have full drainage in them, so we have areas where the drain lines are sand to the top from the bottom of the soil profile to the top. So those areas will dry out a little quicker. So I'll look for visual cues in the field to kind of base my irrigation needs off of, and then go from there and set programs and water at night. I adjust my maintenance schedule to do very deep, infrequent waterings to grow my roots down as deep as I can. You're right, though, when you say irrigation isn't a solve-all. There's nothing that quite matches natural rainfall. Irrigation will get you through periods, but if you have really long periods with no rain, even if your fields are completely irrigated, they'll still stress until you get ample rainfall.
I know Dakota would agree, but I think one thing that we could bring up is climate change. And one of the known effects or impacts from a warming world is that droughts can become more frequent and also more intense. So I think the way that you water the fields and how you go about things could become a little bit more stressful as we move forward. And temperatures are obviously rising. So I know in Bristol we had we had a heat wave being 3 or more days over 90. It was at least 10 days, I think. So so that can be a challenge, I would think, for someone like you.
Oh yeah, we leading into this year's World Series in August, we had 10 days straight with highs over 90 degrees. So and lows over 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is grass doesn't like that kind of weather. So it's very challenging once you get in these weather patterns of hot, really hot, high temperatures during the day, low temperatures at night, and then when you start getting a little bit of rainfall every day and keeping everything wet, you have disease problems. And that's something that we were seeing before this year's World Series. And going in, it was challenging to try to manage the fields with the weather pattern. And about halfway through the series, it eventually broke and the grass kind of started to recover a little bit. But going in, it was a pretty tough weather pattern.
Yeah, so I was curious and you're just mentioning it right now, on the opposite end of the dry part of managing grass. What happens when you get like a big storm, say before a game, and even the infield's a little wet, maybe kind of mudding up, and then you might have, I don't know, some ponding going on. What are some things you guys do to make it safer for the players to be out there?
Okay, that's a really good question, and that's a big part of my job is to manage the field conditions and make sure that the fields are safe for play, and that's the number one priority. Dealing with sports fields and children. So evaluating field conditions and making sure it's safe for play is what I do on a pretty much a daily basis when we're hosting events. But when I'm a crew of one, or when I have my interns in, we really can't do too much as far as pulling a tarp to cover the infield dirt because we just don't have the crew power. So we make sure our infield is graded properly to try to encourage runoff. We have full drainage in the field, so they do take a lot of water. But normally during the World Series, when we have a big crew of volunteers in, if we see a storm come in, we'll make the call and we'll pull the infield tarp and cover the field to prevent a rainout, basically.
So do you actually make that call about when to put the tarp on?
Well, during the World Series, I work closely with the operations staff, and they make the call on whether to pull the tarp or not. During the World Series, the rest of the year, if we had to, it's been sparingly. I think I pulled the tarp once, other than the World Series. But during the World Series, we work with operations staff, and they ultimately make the call.
And do you know where they get their weather information from?
Well, that's another good question. We consult with the meteorologist daily, talk to him about the weather forecast. I'm not exactly sure. I think he might be through WeatherBug. I know they have a WeatherBug app.
Correct. Yeah.
I know they have a WeatherBug app, stationed at the series. But we consult a meteorologist. We discuss what we're seeing for the day, and then make a call accordingly.
Okay, so that actually sounds pretty similar to how the MLB, Major League Baseball, does it. We had a situation last night where a line of showers came through, and it wasn't that bad of a line. It was pretty short-lived line of showers, and they actually had to delay series Game 7. Arguably one of the biggest games in history in a really long time. And I wanted to read a few tweets here about this. I know we did our Twitter section already, but this tweet came from JP Kalb. He says, the worst part of Game 7 last night, umpires trying to act like meteorologists. And I know Weather Twitter kind of exploded when the umpire was trying to explain the weather. I thought he did a pretty decent job, to be honest. But and then there was some commentary about if the MLB actually has a meteorologist on site. And it sounds like they have a private consulting company, similar to how the Little League World Series does it with someone from WeatherBug.
I didn't realize that for MLB.
Well, for the World Series, I think they ramp it up.
Oh, okay.
I think in general, though, each stadium has their own staff or has their own, not staff, but has their own private company that they use. I think the Twins are one of the only ones that actually hire a meteorologist to work for them during games. But I know out here in the Rockies, they hire a private company to do their forecasting and give them a call when there's lightning or severe weather on its way. So, Rob, were you listening to were you watching the game last night? And if you were, what were you kind of thinking when that line of showers was going through?
Well, I saw the delay. I didn't see the radar, but they most likely erred on caution to prevent a rainout and pulled the tarp, and that's pretty much probably the best call there. More than likely, the field can take a substantial amount of water. There's other things that you can do to dry it out. That you can add calcined clay to the infield mix, and that soaks up a lot of water. There should be calcined clay out there already, so it will actually take a good amount of water to make it unplayable. But watching that was pretty interesting, and the point in the game where it happened was kind of funny. But yeah, I'm sure they pulled that tarp just to make sure they could complete the game.
Yeah, I was really impressed that they decided to delay it, because a lot of times there's some consideration about when the game's going to end, and if they do it now, if they do a delay now, then they might have to delay later because the rain's just going to get worse. And it seemed like they had their act together, and they knew the first kind of batch of rain was going to be pretty minimal, and so why not make the field in better condition and put that tarp on, because I know
Sure.
sometimes they'll delay, and the rain delay will last for hours and hours, and then eventually they'll just call the game. And if that happened last night, that would have been a disaster, just from one of the biggest games in a really long time. That would have been that would have been interesting.
So in terms of off-season preparation or long-term outlooks, do you look at any long-range weather forecasts, or do you seek out what might happen months down the road? Is that important?
I usually don't get too concerned with long-range forecasts myself. I kind of just stick to a week or maybe the following week in advance. Is about as far as I look out for the most part, because it's constantly changing, as you know. So I look at the week, and I'll plan our maintenance practices around what I'm seeing for the week.
And what was I going to say? Well, so you obviously do some work with WeatherBug, at least the operations people do. What's the biggest difference between a baseball field and a golf course?
Well, the infield skin, the dirt work. A golf course is just all grass, so it was a little different making the transition to sports turf, where it was, grass was there and it was a priority, but also playability for the infield skin, the mound and the plate, repairing them and rebuilding them, after use. So it took a little getting used to just making the transition and just switching over to sports turf, doing game prep, and making the call for games and player safety, and just evaluating field conditions on a daily basis. Whereas on a golf course, it's all grass. If you get a large amount of rain, it may be too wet to play, but for the most part, it's not unsafe. But on a baseball field, you may run into conditions where it may not be safe for play, and you have to adjust accordingly.
After a short span where you play dozens of games, the other thing that comes into play is the field getting worn out. Do you have to replace the grass, or does it come back on its own in the off season?
Well, I do a lot of sod work. Following the series, I do quite a bit of sod work on Lomity Stadium. Lomity is the older field, and it's just smaller, so it has in the foul ground by the dugouts, the foul territory is just a little bit smaller, so the wear is more concentrated. So I end up doing a lot of sod work in foul territory. I try to see what grass will come back. Some will come back, some won't. It just depends on how much wear and traffic it saw through the series. But I'll do sod work. I'll aerify right after the series, put down fertilizer, I'll seed. I'll just try to encourage growth as much as I can to get repair following the series.
So I was looking at your kind of abbreviated resume here, and it looks like you were in golf grass management for a while. What are the similarities and differences between managing that kind of grass compared to a baseball field?
Well, they're two different types of grass. They're different heights of cut of grass. But a lot of the practices that I've done in the past on golf courses translate very well over into sports turf. The mowing, aerification, fertilization, pesticide applications. All that translates over into where I am now, just kind of in a different degree. Like I said, it's different grass on a golf course. A grass putting green is mowed at 1/8 of an inch, where our fields are mowed at 1 inch. So there's a big difference in height. But pretty much kind of the same principles that I did on the golf course, I do over on the baseball fields.
So you're approaching 10 years in the business of grass management. Over the course of the last 10 years, what has been your biggest challenge, whether it's on a golf course or the baseball fields?
Well, that's a good question too. Conditions. I would just say conditions of the grass I'm managing, and that relates a lot to the weather and the type of weather that you're having for the year. You know, if you have a mild year, where you don't have a lot of days over 90 degrees and you have a decent bit of rainfall through the year, it may not be so challenging. But there's years where it's hot and dry, and if you get little showers during the day and it's over 90 degrees and it just sparks up a lot of disease, it's more challenging. So depending on the year and depending on the weather, that can be a pretty big challenge. And one really important lesson I learned from the golf course relating back to weather and just management of the type of grass we're looking at is knowing when to kind of back off. And a lot of people have problems with this, is when you reach a certain point and your grass gets stressed out from the weather, you got to know when to kind of back off and take it a little easy, maybe reduce your mowing frequency, do a little bit more hand watering, just kind of baby it through these real stressful periods so that you come out on the other side looking good. Whereas if you just kept pushing and mowing like you normally do, and you may end up losing some grass. So weather's a big challenge for sure.
So we ask this question to everyone who comes onto the show. It'll be a little different actually, since you're not, you don't have a meteorology background. But what's some advice that you would ask someone that maybe wants to have a job similar to yours and is going through school right now or going through internships right now? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I would say, well, you kind of hit on it. I would say, get as much experience doing what you think you want to be doing. So whether that be through internships or just on-job experience, go around and get as much experience. If you want to volunteer for an event or a golf event, or volunteer for the World Series or whatever it may be, you kind of gotta find where you fit in best and what you enjoy doing the most. For me, I've always loved being outdoors, and I've always loved sports, so it was a good fit for me. It may not be a job for everybody. There's days where it's real hot and you're outside all day and you come home exhausted, but it's really rewarding in the end to kind of take a step back and look at the field and see what you accomplished.
Well, Rob, it's been fun having you on the show. We thank you for taking time out of your Thursday night to join us, and we hope you had a fun time. Any last words before we depart?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, and hopefully maybe another time.
If you are looking to share this show with any friends on social media or anyone else, if you're a listener or you listen live, it's on demand. That's the great thing about this podcast. Our website is theweatherjunkies.com. Twitter is @TheWXJunkies, and on Facebook, you just search The Weather Junkies. And this is on YouTube. We have the podcast on iTunes. So many different ways you can listen whenever you want. And if you enjoyed it, you can listen to it a second time. But for Dakota, Rob, and myself, thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday evening. We will be back here next week live on Thursday. We hope you'll join us then. But for this night, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Nino.